Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Happy mid-September. We are in the middle of September, so we're getting into fall. It's still hot outside, but I see the changing colors, and 'tis the season. So I hope you guys are doing well this weekend, this Sunday. Let me go ahead and take the banner off, see how the audio. Okay, audio by my wonderful, handsome professor says audio sounds great. Good. That is Second Chances, which is I thought was appropriately titled, I guess, or appropriately chosen because these poor pathetic characters in the books they don't get second chances. We'll talk about the story Frankenstein. Let me go ahead and take the banner off. And then so audio sounds good. That's good because the microphone is really close. So let's see how camera looks. Good. All right. Good to see you all. Let me check the comments. See who's with us today. We've got Ghost Planet Max Inc. Good to see you. My wonderful prof says, "I can't believe my beautiful wife is doing a Frankenstein analysis." It's an analysis that's gonna cover like one element of the whole story. You know, my professor was saying that Frankenstein, literature like Frankenstein, it could be a whole semester of lectures on just how deep such literature is, and I'm only going to cover one or two aspects of it and maybe just kind of a broad overview or impression of the story. It's my first time reading Frankenstein. Just in general, I will say it's one of those books. It's not a big book, but the language is a little bit more dense, I would say. Not dense in a bad way, but it's a meatier language because we're working with 1800s England, so obviously vocabulary and sentence structure and how idioms were used is going to be different. I don't even know if that piece of literature had idioms now that I think about it, but anyway, it was not only slow going because of the language. It's not like a Star Wars EU novel where the language kind of goes through very quickly, but it's also it's such a somber, grim, dark tale, and there's no levity. Sorry, I have to sneeze all of a sudden. 1 second. Okay, I'm good. We're all good. So it is really quite the piece of fiction, and I'm glad I read it for the first time. I needed to read it, and I'm glad I did. And I'll be talking about that. But before we do that, Ace Moic, channel member, is in the house. Hello, Madame Essie, and all the Earthlings in the comments. Speaking of channel members, let me just go ahead and say this right off the bat. So I went from 12 members because some great people like Crystal Ashes have gifted memberships, but it went back down to 7 members, and I would like just one more member, so 8 members total. I need someone to commit to paying this channel $2 a month, just so. Here's why I want 8 members and not 7, because YouTube needs to have the minimum of 8 members so people can see on my YouTube page, hey, these are the members. I won't have members showing on my YouTube page until I have 8 members. So I've been sitting comfortably at 7. I would love one person to just sit comfortably at $2 a month so I can have my superficial needs, so I can have that banner of channel members across my YouTube page so people can see I have members. So if anyone out there wants to pay me $2 a month, or not me, but my channel, $2 a month, I'd be so happy. So we'll start with that. Now, I need to actually exit for just a second because my OCD is killing me right now. I'm not going to tell you what I need to fix, but I'm going to fix it right now. Okay. Maybe you don't know what was fixed, but I fixed something in my room. So if you wanted to go back and see what one of these things I fixed, go ahead. It was my curtain. It wasn't straight. All right, so let's continue on down. We've got Brian Gilmartin. Good to see you. Frankenstein. Nice way to kick off the spooky season. It was a good first piece of literature. I'm gonna go into the story, the mysterious or the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's my next tale, and then Dracula. I'll finish the season with Dracula, and then I'll probably go back to Star Wars, or it's either going to be Star Wars or H.G. Wells, because I might just binge on H.G. Wells for a little bit. Actually, speaking of which, Professor Geek did finish Invisible Man, and he watched the movie. Oh gosh, who is it? Claude Rains? Is he the Invisible Man? I know Owl will know, and I know my prof will know. All right, let's continue on down. Big Al. Speaking of which, oh, Crystal Ashes. Sorry, Big Al. I'll mention you in just a second. Crystal Ashes, wonderful person that Crystal Ashes is. And Crystal Ashes, are you a he or a she? Because I'd love to use the proper pronoun, but thank you for 5 memberships. I really appreciate that. Well, thank you. So if one of you guys can keep on going, because YouTube, even if I have 12 temporary memberships, YouTube will say, no, we need it permanent. Just so you know, just in case you were curious. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and bring that up. Appreciate that so much, Crystal Ashes. All right. Yes. So, and yes, Big Al says, I think Claude Rains. I think, is that how you pronounce his last name? Yes, yes. Yes, I was right. Some bit of movie trivia I was right about. And Vincent Price is in the second one. I would like to see the first one. And I read the book like 11 years ago, so I don't remember it, but Prof has some thoughts on that. All right. So we have Crystal Ashes. Thank you so much for coming. We've got Final Fantasy Fan. Also good to see you. Let's see if I've missed anyone. I don't think so from up there. Digifex Electronics. Shelley had an interesting story of a Roman soldier brought back to life. Oh, see, here's the thing. My Professor Geek is there you go. My Professor Geek is definitely on the ball when it comes to the history behind such stories written. So he's been doing wonderful streams and giving an in-depth analysis of not just literature. In fact, even it's not been so much an in-depth analysis of the literature itself. It's been more like behind the scenes, the creation of such stories. So always check out Professor Geek for his streams on the Universal Monsters. He's been doing it for it's been weekly on Saturday nights in the last couple months in preparation for the fall season. Even in the heat of July, he started it. He just had to. We've got Samuel Proctor also in. Frankenstein, you say, was one of the few classic literature I got to read. Pieces of literature I got to read in high school. The teacher was one of those few conservative ones in school, and he was cool. Well, that's good. Yeah, you're a youngin' too. I think you're in your early 20s, and that's good. That is so good. You had a teacher even just recently in high school who would promote that literature. That's wonderful. All right. And I should be good with my stream. I will say, yesterday, I think I was losing my voice, so my voice might sound different or might give. So hopefully I'll get through all the stuff that I want before. And I wasn't like losing my voice, but it would cut off every once in a while. I'm like, that's kind of weird. Thanks, Crystal Ashes. Yeah, no sneeze. Yeah, no sneeze. You can't see it. Like, faces get contorted and it looks really, really gross. So I have to mute the video, I say. Mute the video. Adega Outlaw, good to see you. If you like your sci-fi and your dark fantasy, check out Adega Outlaw's books on his channel. He reads his books. I believe you read your books, Adega Outlaw. I'm not a dark fantasy person myself, but I do want to let people know that that's out there if you want. But also Amazon. He has his works on Amazon as well. Good to see Elias Jones. And I think that's everyone, at least in the chat. Big Al Presents says, my drama class did The Invisible Man on stage. I was the understudy. Oh, you were the understudy for The Invisible Man? That's so cool. That is so cool. That would have been a fun project. That's so cool. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome, Adiga Outlaw. Good to see you. All right, so here's the thing. I want to talk about Frankenstein, and there's so much to cover, and I'm only going to talk about really one main theme in the whole course of the book, and I I can't imagine not sharing spoilers. I'd love to try my best, but I just don't think that's uh, likely. Shall we say? Because there's just a lot to talk about, and I finished the book 2 nights ago, and so it's one of those things where I'm going to tell you my thoughts on it, what I think of the themes, the most important themes, what I think is really, really important, like very, very important for any writer, because what Mary Shelley accomplished with the themes I'm about to talk about, it's super important for things like pacing, suspense, conflict. It's just absolutely important. It's also important for motive of a pathetic character or a villainous character. I mean, it's really good stuff. I will say this just right off the bat. For Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, there are really no heroes. There are virtuous people who come at the monster out of a place of misunderstanding. But there's virtuous people around the Frankenstein family. But as far as the main characters, besides the sea captain, who we see first with his letters to his sister, and then before he meets Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein himself, besides the sea captain, you're in the perspective of effectively a mad scientist and a creature, a monster, who actually you can sympathize in a way with both characters, but they're both very pathetic characters, and they're both morose. They do bad things for different reasons, and there's no real hero in the story. There's no levity, by the way, in the story. In the original story, there's no room for humor. It is dark and bleak and emotional and grim from the start. And I will say, actually, with Victor Frankenstein as a character in this book, I will say he's a very interesting character. He's a very dynamic character. He he almost comes at a place of like a split personality with certain events that take place because of his creating the monster. But I also wonder, and I want to be very forward when I say this in a kind way, but the characterization of Victor Frankenstein is a very interesting one because he's a man in Europe in the 1800s. He's definitely not stoic. He's hyper emotional. He's got some. You could almost, if you were to clinically bring it about in these days, you would personality disorder of some kind. And I want to say this loosely, not medically, but he's kind of bipolar with his emotions. Sometimes he's completely morose and despondent and doesn't say a word to people, and then other times he's in fits of rage. And I was talking about it with my prof because, like, yeah, he's in a bind. He's in a real bad predicament with what he has before him. But he's also hyper emotional, and we were wondering. I was positing if Victor Frankenstein had been different characterization, if he had been different, if it had not been a woman who wrote him, like Mary Shelley, and also, based on Prof streams and the history behind the writing of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley did not associate with the best of men. And so, Victor Frankenstein is a pathetic man. Now, it serves the story very well, but he's not a person to idolize. His tale to the sea captain is to warn you that, oh, I pursued such a feat, I pursued such high goals, I pursued such knowledge, and look where it's brought me. He's supposed to be a very tragic, a very pathetic, cautionary tale of a man. With that, yeah, that serves the story, but he's also crazy emotional. He's one way one time, he's another way. He suffers. Well, we'll get into the characterizations of him, but he suffers mental breakdowns. I mean, he neglects to do things. He neglects to do noble things like tell the truth. of what he's done. He does not confess. He needed to go to the priest, even if he wasn't Catholic. He needed to confess to someone and stuff. So we'll actually talk about that a little bit more in detail with some a couple of themes, really one theme. And that theme is the theme of knowledge. And let me see if I can put a, trying to hold, yeah, that's fine. Hold it in place. There we go. There are my notes. My notes are right there. So what I got out of the book, and again, there could be so many themes. There could be so many. It's a very dense book. There's so much to extract from. But I'm just going to be talking about the most important to me, and that is the theme of knowledge, because knowledge is the impetus of this story. And it deals with the morality of knowledge, whether knowledge is good or evil. It deals with the acquiring of knowledge through obsession and what that does to your personhood. There's also the conscience of acquiring knowledge and developing a conscience of and awareness of sin and virtue because you've obtained knowledge, as with the creature's experience. By the way, the Frankenstein creature is really known as just the creature or the monster, so he has no name. I probably won't use the name Frankenstein for this reason, because when I talk about Frankenstein, I'm talking about the scientist, the protagonist there. So getting back into knowledge, you've got the morality of knowledge, the obsession of acquiring knowledge, the conscience of what happens when you obtain knowledge about mankind and having an understanding of sin and virtue, because that's really important with both characters' experiences, but especially the creatures. And then also, what was the other thing too? Oh yeah, that forbidden esoteric knowledge. I mean, is it right to pursue knowledge that exists at all cost? And it really comes, this whole story really boils down to the question, and I have it written here, is all knowledge good? And I have a question right beneath that, and that is, well, if knowledge exists, by knowledge I mean the information to procure an inevitable result, meaning, oh, I have this knowledge, therefore I can effectively create this result. And that is, with Frankenstein's experience, it's creating life. Well, because I have that knowledge, because that knowledge exists and I can procure a result, because it exists, is it good? And that's the whole moral of the story. With the experience of Frankenstein and the monster, the answer is a definitive no. This is a cautionary tale. All knowledge is not necessarily good. Just because it exists, just because it's out there to create something or to have a result, just because it exists does not mean it's good. For instance, I mean, the simplest way of putting it is, well, evil does exist. So therefore, is it good? No, it's evil. Just because it's in effect, it's a being of some kind or an embodiment, just because evil plays out in some way, and it's very effective in our lives and around the world. Is it good? No. Just because it exists doesn't mean it's good. That was kind of a long way of going about that, but that's really, really important. The morality, we'll talk about first the morality of knowledge. Just because that knowledge is out there does not mean man should pursue it. With Frankenstein and this, pretty much the precursor to all sci-fi. Really, it is. I mean, it is more fantastical, it's more supernatural than it is sci-fi, but it's the precursor to sci-fi in that it asks the question, just because we can, does that mean we should? And obviously the answer is no. So why would such knowledge exist? Or how, I guess, how do I put this? The morality of knowledge. We'll talk about that first as the theme. The overarching theme is knowledge. And we've got little sub-themes, if you will. And that is, the first one I'm mentioning is the morality of knowledge. In the story, Frankenstein was able to procure enough knowledge to animate living matter, or really create life in the form of a man. And we see the result pretty much immediately that that was not an okay thing. The first is actually Frankenstein's reaction to his creation. He's utterly dismayed at his creation. When life comes into the monster, he is dismayed, he's traumatized, he's horrified, he runs away. He runs away from his laboratory, he locks himself up in his apartment, or I don't think he even locks himself up, because I think there's a moment where the creature comes to his bed. It's kind of like Christmas Carol, like the ghosts, removing the bed curtains, and I think there's one flash of a moment where Victor Frankenstein beholds his creation. His creation is grinning, but his skin is very much pale and yellow. I think he even, or Shelley rather, describes the skin as being almost translucent. Like actually, if you have a fair complexion, you can see, like, people with fair complexion can have like spider veins, and I can see my veins a lot more easily because of the skin color. But you can't see my organs, you can't see like blood vessels and stuff, thank goodness, because there's a little bit of a constitution with the creation of man, because God is a good God, and he creates people in his image. But with Frankenstein and his monster, you get this impression that you could see the ghastliness of like blood vessels and 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 things being seen that are not really meant to be seen. Our vitals are not really meant to be seen. There's even, and I didn't really pick this up in the book, but I did read a little bit later in a reference, I think it was Wikipedia, where he has to create the monster to be like 7 or 8 feet tall, because he can't really work in the minutia of smaller organs. It's just too intricate for him. So that's why the beast is so large, or not beast, creature. He's not an animal, he's a creature. That's why he's so large, because Frankenstein is working with animating the organs and the things that sustain a human body on a larger scale. He can't work with the minute. And so that's why the creature is so large and out of proportion. Also, throughout the story, he can maintain incredible strength, and withstand the elements of winter and inclement weather and mountains. And he can also not, he doesn't need the nutrition like man has. He can feast on just nuts and berries. I don't even think he eats meat in the story. Could be, but I just remember him just eating and roasting nuts and berries. The creature does. Anyway, so if the knowledge is there to animate life and to create life, that's not, well, we would say that's not constitutional, that's not natural in the order of things. Is it good? Well, now, human beings, we do create life through the matrimony and the think of a marriage, between a man and woman, and then that's how procreation happens, and that's how bearing children happens. So yes, we do create life in a very, very specific way to populate the world, which is very good. But this is different. This is a scientific or a pseudoscientific way. It's the I think in the book it's described as natural philosophy, which might be just another word for anatomy and biology at the time. It's more theorized than anything. But, going back to that question, well, the knowledge is there, so why can't I pursue it? Well, the main reason is that, whether in literature or in real life, it's like, well, is that your station to obtain that knowledge and procure the result? Well, no. In Frankenstein's case, he couldn't make something beautiful. He couldn't make a human being that takes in the wonders of life, that has a caring, nurturing relationship that found in the parents. The father that is the protector, the mother that is the nurturer, maybe siblings, to have that kind of social order of things, distant cousins and all that. Man can't procure that by means of building something. You can have that through procreation, but to build something in the image of God with your own hands and with natural science is not meant to be. That was the cautionary tale that Mary Shelley has us with Frankenstein and his creature. So the station matters. Maybe the knowledge exists, but maybe only few or one person, and the divine being, maybe only the divine can employ such knowledge. And it's not in man's place to pursue that knowledge. Even if even if it exists, even if man can obtain it, should we? And the answer in this story, as I said before, is a definitive no. So that's the first big idea when it comes to the theme of knowledge with Frankenstein, or the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, is that there is morality behind knowledge. And I kind of figured this was going to be presented in my stream. I will say I might go into a little bit more religious, or at least between right and wrong. And I know there might be people who would disagree with me, but we have achieved science and medicine in a lot of favorable ways, but also terrible ways. You could disagree with me on the political spectrum, but things like euthanasia, assisted suicide, abortion, especially with assisted suicide, I think there might be some ghastly effects. I don't know exactly the details, but, things that are not, they're like, oh, this will be painless, your death will be painless. And then actually the body contorts and different things like that. So all those things are abhorrent in my perspective as a Christian. But we have the medicine to employ those practices. Does that mean we should? And to me, I don't believe so. I believe this in the sanctity of life. And even if people are saying, well, that's what they want, it's like that's not my call. I'm not the arbiter of truth and justice in that way. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I should do it. So there have been a lot of newfound knowledge in the way of science that we're in a very good time of medicine. Like in this timeline right now in 2024, getting into 2025, we really do have great medicinal practices. And I feel terrible for people who live through things like the Black Plague and stuff. So there's a lot of good things to have, but with that comes this, setting the precedent. Like, oh well, maybe we can play and dabble over here. It's like, no, don't mess with that science. You're not divine. You're not God. And I think Mary Shelley is for all the shortcomings she might have had done in her life, or seen in her life, at least she gave us a wonderful cautionary tale why we shouldn't mess with this kind of, back then it was pseudoscience, but science in general now. So there is morality with acquiring knowledge. Is it good knowledge? Is it to will the good of the other, or is it knowledge to procure a very malicious result? So something to think about. One sec, let me grab some water real quick. All right, let's see. All right, let's actually talk about what knowledge is good and what knowledge is bad as far as the story is concerned, because the acquiring of knowledge that is evil actually was through the doctor or scientist, Victor Frankenstein. But with the monster, however, at least initially in the first couple of years of his life, it was obtaining knowledge and acquiring knowledge in a very good way. Actually, I kind of want to start with the well, we sort of touched on the forbidden knowledge that was with Frankenstein. Like, okay, what are you pursuing with these sciences? Oh, you've created a monster who will, scare the populace, and eventually we see that there are some crude murders in as the events of the story goes along. But the knowledge of good, or what knowledge is good when it comes to the monster's experience, or the creature. I probably should say creature. Now, it was very touching when I was reading through the creature's narrative, because you really do sympathize, at least at first, with the creature. I was team creature, like really at the start of his tale, because even though he's like 7 and 8 feet, and he's got he's not proportioned right, and he's ghastly. He really is no better than an infant who is left defenseless. And at first I thought he was going to go into the tale of wandering in the streets and of the city before people try to attack him, and that eventually does happen in a village. But he actually goes into something where I was feeling really sorry for him, and he's talking about understanding his senses, his five senses. When he's left to himself, he doesn't know, he can't distinguish what the eyes are supposed to do, what the ears are supposed to do, his sense of smell. Everything is kind of a mesh of all that kind of stuff. All the senses are really blurred. He has no understanding of how things function. Not really until he understands what daylight is, what the moon is, what shadows are, and I think even more sympathetically, which got to my heart, he he basically was thirsty until he understood the sound and the smell and the taste of water. And until he could, I don't even think he could see water before he could, cup water in his hands. I think that was what I remember. I could be wrong in the narrative. But um he's left completely defenseless. It's like leaving a baby to the baby's not going to understand how to feed itself. It's not going to understand how to acquire sustenance and water and all that. So that was a really pitiable moment in the narrative where he's just wandering in the woods. He's he's so bereft to leave. There was, I think, two hunters or something that left a fire, and he found the science behind, the creature did find the science behind stoking the fire and keeping the fire going for an indefinite amount of time. But he then started, so that's a good knowledge. That's something to acquire, to warm you to. In fact, he was so joyous understanding fire. He wanted to grasp it, to handle it, because it gave him light, it gave him warmth. But then it seared his hands. It burned his hands, and then he understood he understood the boundaries of fire. Like, okay, fire is light. It keeps me warm. I can roast nuts. I can't roast berries. That doesn't really work. But I can roast nuts. That's very favorable. So the very simple knowledge of he didn't even start the fire. It was, I think, the hunters or fishermen or whatever started the fire, and then they left, and then he just maintained the fire. And he was besides himself for, like, I think, several hours. He needed to leave. I can't remember why. I think he was trying to find his maker, or maybe there was another reason. I can't quite remember. But in order to survive, he had to travel, continue to travel, and he was really besides himself to leave the fire that his refuge. And like, it got to my heart, like, oh my gosh, like, because he doesn't know how to start a fire. Like, that's very, very important knowledge for men to survive. Before anything else, we got to start the fire. And so that kind of knowledge is very, very good. He also, over time, over the matter of months, he acquires um familial relations. So he kind of just wanders in a village, goes into the store. He sees things that look edible, like bread and stuff. He goes into a store, or goes through a door, and then, like, a kid screams, and all these villagers attack him or run away. So he's forced to hide. He's forced to flee. And then he finds himself in this little hovel. I think it's adjacent, or maybe really close by to a cottage. And he starts understanding familial relationships, like an older man with two young people. He understands, okay, that's father, this is brother, this is sister, but they also go by Felix and Agatha. Father is DeLacy. He talks, he sings, but he's led by his son because he's blind. He's understanding the limitations. He's also understanding melancholy. Like, to him, like, they're poor. They're living in poverty because of an injustice that ends up happening to the son. But he lives in or these cottagers rather, they live in extreme poverty, and he thinks, well, this it's still a home, you know. Why are they so melancholy? Why are they so sad? Why is there? And then he starts to understand, well, they have very little to eat in the winter. Felix has to spend the whole day cutting wood and bringing wood. So the creature starts, you know, giving wood, cutting down wood for Felix, so he doesn't have to go out all day. He can spend the day repairing the home while Agatha prepares, you know, meals and watches over her father or their father. And then he clears out snow. He does all these things for months and months and months, you know, helping out with very, very limited knowledge. Very limited knowledge. This is before he starts speaking and uttering and reading. This is before he starts reading. And then the you know, Felix and the family, they have a visitor who is really meant to be Felix's lover. She's Turkish, so she doesn't understand the French language, and so they start teaching her French, and with that in hiding, the creature starts learning the language French, and with that he also starts learning to write because, you know, Felix will, I think, has a blackboard or something, and teaches letterings, and this kind of knowledge is so it just excites the senses with the monster. He's so overjoyed to know the science of language. So yeah, that's also good knowledge to obtain. This is very, very good knowledge to obtain, to understand language and the art of language and words to communicate to people. Unfortunately, he is very unsuccessful with communicating with his family, but he's at least understanding what they're talking about. And then in the lessons on language and the art of language, Felix and the Turkish woman converse about geography, about history, about the romantic stories between, you know, Europe and Turkey and Arabia at the time. And then also with that, the creature learns about war and how mankind can commit collateral damage over, you know, petty reasons or prejudices and all that. So he's starting to understand more than just happiness and melancholy with poverty and basic needs, but he's starting to understand disgust. Like he's repulsed by man being so, how can man who has all these familial relations, and even if they're in poverty, there's this absolute love in the family between this brother and sister, this elderly father, this Turkish woman. How can it be where man is so prejudiced against each other that they would go to war? So he's starting to understand disgust and having his own prejudices against man because of his knowledge of history. Now, I would say history is still important. It's still a very important thing to have. Acquiring knowledge of history is a very important thing to acquire. So he still, with all that though, he still has an absolute admiration and a an affection for these people that don't know his existence, and all he wants is to have one of these human creatures look upon him with affection. He also starts understanding just how wretched he is, not just because he's alone and no one knows him, or if they do see him, they're afraid of him. He's also understanding when he sees his own reflection upon a mirror or like a pond, like in a pool of water or something. He sees how hideous he is. He starts understanding why the villagers had turned on him out of fear. But he still has a mind of a child, even with all this acquired knowledge, because he's very resentful. He starts building this resentment and even a little bit of revenge toward people who have misunderstood him, but he doesn't understand misunderstanding. He's still a child. He's like, this isn't fair. This isn't fair that they turned on me. And there's at one point where he has to travel to find his maker, Victor Frankenstein. There's one point where he saves a girl from drowning in a river, and her father beholds him holding her, thinking he's gonna kill her, because he doesn't know. You know, he's devastated by the sight of his father being in the arms of this creature, not knowing that that creature just saved his daughter's life, and he shoots him. He runs away, and the creature pursues because he wants to establish like some understanding. Like, I saved your child, I saved your child, but he gets shot in the shoulder, and then he's nursing his wound for like several weeks. And with that comes this festering of vengeance. He's starting to build an insatiable hatred of mankind. Now, really, it is for mankind, but it's really directed to his maker, because when he sees the familiar relation with DeLacy and their siblings, or I'm sorry, DeLacy and the two siblings, the brother and sister, he's like, well, my maker deserted me. Victor Frankenstein, as far as morality is concerned, yeah, he's terrified by the creature. You want to sympathize with that, but at the same time, he abandoned his creation. He pretty much left the creation defenseless and able to die, and so the creature has no understanding of affection and familial virtue because of that. So up until the point of festering, vengeance and bitterness toward mankind, he did acquire a lot of good knowledge. He acquired the knowledge of language and words and speaking. He fine-tuned his senses, where he could use his eyes, where he could use his sense of smell. All this is really, really good knowledge to survive and to communicate with a race of beings, with the same mannerisms, not mannerisms, but the same manner of speaking and writing and all that. So knowledge in the monster's experience, even with the history of war, was good to acquire. It's just the reaction, like the Turkish woman is also reacting in disgust against things like war, and it's true with the monster. Like he's like, why do men behave this way when they have all these good things? Because he loves nature. The monster loves spring. He loves the sense of spring. He loves the bird calls and all that. All right, so let's see. So that was that's the morality of knowledge. There is good knowledge, there is wicked knowledge, there's forbidden knowledge, there's esoteric knowledge. Well, it was in a philosophical way, all the science that Frankenstein was employing was somewhat esoteric. He was very much inspired by a few writers, older writers, that really tickled his fancy as far as imagination and what he could do with science. So let's talk about, so we talked about the morality of knowledge. There's just a few things, then we'll get into the chat. Let's talk about the obsession of acquiring knowledge, or the obsession of knowledge. So, yes, as I said before, there's good knowledge to pursue, there's wicked knowledge to pursue, and in Frankenstein's case, it was wicked knowledge. He has no station as a man to try to build a human being and create and sustain life. That's under the divine order of things, or in a good through good matrimony, you can procreate. You can have a child through your commitment to a woman. Those are good things as far as bringing life and sustaining life and maintaining life. But no, this was very interesting. Like, there was this. This is kind of where I sympathized with Frankenstein a little bit. Not that I want to pursue evil knowledge or anything, but he was so obsessed that he went to this location, I believe in Switzerland, away from his hometown of Geneva. He went to pursue science because he had the aptitude of science, and he was very much intrigued with natural philosophy. And there were some writers, older writers, that really excited his imagination. Some professors were in favor of cultivating his pursuit in natural philosophy. There were some professors that were very harsh with him, but other professors were very wanted to cultivate in a very nice way his aptitude for science and natural philosophy. Now, in that time, though, where he's in studies, it kind of happens pretty fast, going from being this student of a higher field in science to being in a laboratory and then just being completely obsessed with the reanimation of matter and maintaining life and it's to the point where he becomes a shut-in. It's not that he excludes people, but he just doesn't spend time with people anymore because he's so obsessed with his knowledge. And not only does he exclude the social life, which human beings need, that's a very important thing, whether in the religious context or the familial context or even just having friends. That's very, very important for a person's well-being. Just you can't deny that. He excludes that. He pushes that out in favor of this scientific pursuit. Now, not only does he forego all social interaction, but he also foregoes things like sleep and keeping himself healthy for his scientific achievements. Now, this is really important as a scientist, especially, or someone who's working in medicine, because if you don't take care of yourself, if you do not rest, you're not going to have rather the presence of mind needed to accomplish that goal. This is for any field, this is for any ambition. You can't lose sleep so many days, so many nights before your mind starts degenerating. Now, we see with Victor Frankenstein's case in the book that he doesn't go insane, but he does suffer breakdown after mental breakdown. He has a nervous condition. He's even before reanimating or animating the life of the monster, he suffers from agitation, anxiety, extreme agony. He's very much one way one day and another way the next. Despondent and gloomy, and he has no energy one day to, fits of rage and agitation another day. Well, it might have been in his disposition before, but he had a very good childhood. He had a very sustainable childhood. He had a very happy family. And a very good father, a very good mother, who unfortunately died of scarlet fever, but a very good familial community in Geneva. Now that he's shut himself in and he forgoes the socializing of his, with the professors and his students and his colleagues and all that, and the wonders of the city, he's utterly alone, he's isolated, and his mind is degenerating. Not so much where he is insane, but he does not have a presence of mind. And because of that, for many cases in the story, he is incredibly short-sighted. He does not see things through in very tragic ways at the end, which we might talk about. But I'll just say it now. Like it will be a spoiler, but there's one point where at the climax of this tension building up between the monster and Victor Frankenstein, Frankenstein is tasked with making a female companion for the monster. The monster says, I will withdraw. I will, if you give me a female companion to have her have affection on me, we'll go to South Africa or South America. We'll never be seen again. We'll live in the jungle. We'll live in the wilderness. Mankind does not have to see us anymore. Now he actually does create this female character or this creature, but then he thinks about it again and says, well, they could procreate, they could be a plague on humanity. So in front of the monster, he like rips her, I don't know if he rips her to shreds, but he like tosses her off the table and into the room. This of course enrages the monster, and the monster says, I will be with you on your wedding night. Now, there was no mode for suspense for me. I knew exactly what that meant. Frankenstein tears the female monster apart and says, I'm not going to create her. I'm not going to give her life. And the monster says, I will be with you on your wedding night. Well, what does that mean? Frankenstein, in his short-sightedness, thinks, I'm going to kill you on your wedding night so you can't be happy. That's not what the monster meant. It was so obvious that he was going to kill his new wife. It was on the wedding night, the monster strangled his bride. easy thing. Like if Mary Shelley tried to like be like suspenseful with that, I knew, and she probably didn't. I knew he meant Elizabeth, his half sister, who he marries, because and it's an adopted sister. It's not like they're not blood related. She's adopted quite later in his childhood, and it was different back then. But anyways, that's what the monster meant. Like the monster meant he was going to kill Frankenstein's bride because he wouldn't give his bride life. And this is an example of the horrible short-sightedness that comes from mental breakdowns and nervous breakdowns. And we'll get into why Frankenstein probably had these breakdowns. There's at least one really big factor that I want to get into called the knowledge gap. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to go through the whole lecture and then get into the chat. But this is super important with writing. So the obsession of obtaining knowledge, like you can be focused, you can really be hyper focused, you can want to pursue good things, good knowledge, but at the expense of your health and at the expense of just pretty much excommunicating yourself from society. That's not a good thing. If you forego health, if you forego rest, you will not have the presence of mind to make good decisions. And in Frankenstein's case, he progressively, he never got insane, but he progressively couldn't see things clearly. He progressively got short-sighted over time, saying, "Oh, he's going to kill me." No. Like, you did not think this through. He's going to kill your wife because you didn't give him his wife. Easy if you have the present, a very good state of mind. If you have a presence of mind, if you're not suffering from agitation and mental breakdowns, it's easy to see that that's what the monster was going to do. It's too late for Frankenstein, unfortunately. And unfortunately for Elizabeth, who is one of few relationships that Frankenstein has, who is virtuous. She is virtuous. Oh yeah, yeah. So okay, we gotta talk about the knowledge gap. One sec, let me grab some water and cough a second. All right. Oh, stretch. Okay. So this is great. I love talking about this so much. I knew I was gonna get going with this. So um let's talk about the knowledge gap. So I don't know if you've ever heard that term knowledge gap, but it's a really effective tool for writing. Like no matter what genre you write and no matter what story you're saying, the knowledge gap is absolutely important. Now, knowledge gap, I don't even know if that's a term. I have heard it from the writer of writing. I call him the writer of writing, and that is James Scott Bell. That's if you look up his some of his books are pretty. I have to actually reread them. It's been like read his books on writing. There were some good things that I learned from his writing on writing. One of those things that stuck with me was what he called the knowledge gap, and the knowledge gap is crucial when it comes to plot, pacing, and characterization. Not even characterization, just characters in general. What a knowledge gap is what it sounds like. The characters do not have enough knowledge to have a good perspective of how things are. The characters, that actually is one way of the knowledge gap, is there's information that the reader knows, that the reader has, that the characters don't have, and that can build tension. Not just for mystery novels, this can build tension for a lot of things. I'm using the knowledge gap pretty effectively in my larger sci-fi work 2 or 3 times. So like in the course of 4 or 5 books that I want this story to be in, there's going to be like two major, well, actually 3, but 2 or 3 big knowledge gaps that main characters don't have, that really changes their perspective on how things are and what they need to do to understand the world around them. Now, so the knowledge gap can be very, very effective with characters. It can also be effective with readers if you do it very, very well, where the characters have knowledge of something that the reader doesn't have. And that's really good for something like mystery or something. It can be done very well. I've seen it done very, very poorly where it's like, okay. And I've done it poorly actually. Like I had a draft with one of my stories and my prof said, okay, this is way too much hidden information. It might upset the reader. I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I've toned it down myself. So either the characters might have not enough knowledge to understand how the world is, or the reader doesn't have enough knowledge to understand what the world is. In Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, this is absolutely true with Victor Frankenstein and his family and his friends, his close friends. So what does Frankenstein and the reader have in common? Well, they have knowledge of the creature. Like the world really doesn't know that the creature is at large. Yes, he happens upon a village and they attack him and he flees, and then he tries to present himself to this family of cottagers, and it's unfortunately very unsuccessful. But only the reader, or really it's the perspective of the sea captain that Victor Frankenstein is recounting this tale. So only the sea captain, via the reader, and only Victor Frankenstein himself. Now, this is really unfortunate for Frankenstein in a lot of different ways, and I'm going to try to go through the main things. Frankenstein not once until the very end, when he wants the government to pursue this creature, not once does he confess what he's done by creating this creature. No one knows about this creature until it's too late. His younger brother is killed by the creature, but his brother had no knowledge of the creature until he was pulled in by the creature, where the creature's trying to reason with him until he finds out that the boy belongs to the name Frankenstein, and then the creature outright kills the boy. The murder of the boy is never found out until way too late. Unfortunately, William, the younger brother who's murdered by the creature, is he is murdered, but the charge falls on this nanny called Justine, who is she's also an adoptive daughter for a few years with the Frankenstein family. So they don't believe, like at least the family doesn't believe that Justine is guilty of the murder of this poor innocent boy. But there's only circumstantial evidence to be had. We find later that the creature has a pendant from the boy, and he puts the pendant, the boy's mother, the picture of the boy's mother, under the folds of Justine's dress, who is sleeping, and he basically, he runs away. It's such a sad thing for Justine, because Justine is innocent, but the circumstantial evidence is placed against her. All the city throws their cards upturned black, meaning, she's going to be condemned to death. She's hung for a crime she does not commit because it can't be explained. But Victor Frankenstein, he didn't see the creature kill the boy. And he doesn't learn till much later that the creature had killed the boy. But he knew Justine was innocent and that the creature was guilty. I was hoping it wasn't the case. I was hoping that the creature did not kill the boy and it was something else. But we see later in the story, spoilers, that he does kill the boy. Frankenstein does not tell the truth. He believes, and he confesses to Elizabeth, I know she's innocent. And Elizabeth's like, oh, I'm so glad you think that, Victor, because I think she's innocent too. And in truth, well, we sort of don't know until the end, but yes, Justine is innocent. She's condemned to death. She's hung. And after that, Elizabeth has kind of a cynical view of the world, because people they weren't looking with direct evidence. They were looking with, oh, hey, there's the brooch of the pendant of the boy's mom in the folds of her dress, and she was out around the same location at the same time. Victor does not tell the truth about the creature. He doesn't even say that it could be the creature that I've created. He doesn't even say yes or no. He doesn't even say it could be the creature I created that killed this boy. Because his excuse is, well, they'll deem me insane because it's such a horrific thing to think about. It's such a fantastical thing to think about. And it's like, listen, whether they think you're insane or not, you need to tell the truth, and he doesn't. So the reader is left with Frankenstein, with this knowledge gap. Like, no one no one can suspect the creature has done it because they don't know that this creature exists. Only Frankenstein knows, and the reader knows. And so that's one example of the knowledge gap. So a woman is condemned unjustly. And I'm like, that was my turning point. I was kind of sympathizing with Frankenstein until that point where he doesn't tell the truth because he's afraid people are going to think he's insane. It's like, if that's the consequence of that, then that's the consequence. Like it's important to tell the truth. It's important to confess, even if people don't believe you. You know, because it might have worked in Justine's favor. She might have been saved from that, but he doesn't come clean. So that's the first example of the knowledge gap. The second example is unfortunately with Frankenstein's father, who's a very good man. He loves his family. He loves his son. He wants the best for Frankenstein and his son. And he I feel so sorry for this father because everyone's thinking Frankenstein is very melancholy and very morose because of the death of Justine. Everyone is. But they're like, son, we're getting through this and we're moving on. This is a tragedy, but let's try to make the best of what we have. Elizabeth is trying to move on and be happy again. I'm trying to be happy. Why don't you, son? Like you being so melancholy is not making me happy. And then I'm just thinking, if I'm in Frankenstein's perspective, I'm like, oh, Dad, you have no idea what I've done. And he never tells. He never tells his father what he's done. He never tells Elizabeth. He was going to, okay, so here's the thing. He never tells Elizabeth what he's done. He's like, I have something to tell you, but let's wait until after our matrimony and our ceremony, and let's wait until the honeymoon for me to tell you, which is a weird thing for, what man would say, listen, honey, I've got some very dark secrets, but let's get married first, and then I'll confess all my dark secrets. It's like, because Elizabeth is thinking, he's been away, he's been traveling all so many months, so maybe there's another woman. He's like, it's not another woman. It's like, why didn't you tell? If anyone he could find it was Elizabeth. She was like a salve. Like she was his medicine. Like she could get the melancholy away even just momentarily. It's like, man, you should have just at least told Elizabeth, have her decide for herself if he should go and all that. And no, he decides to marry her, and then the monster kills her. So she never knows about the monster until too late, until she's strangled to death. And the father is not strangled to death, but the father is so distraught on the death of his beloved adopted daughter that he's already declining in health. He's already older, so he passes away a few days later. So he never knows about the monster. Elizabeth doesn't know about the monster until too late. His best friend Clerval doesn't one night, and this is all out of vengeance. The monster wants to play on Victor, and it's not until Victor himself dies on the boat because he basically pursues the monster like all across the North Pole, and he catches hypothermia. A ship who's kind of careens into ice and is stuck in ice finds the man, finds like a lot of dogs, but a lot of dogs unfortunately perish. And because of that, because of hypothermia, he falls ill and he dies. He wants to pursue the monster to his death, but he ends up not being able to kill the monster. And then the monster, seeing his maker has died, there's nothing else for him to live because vengeance was the last thing he lived for. And then now that his maker is gone, he goes. It's heavily implied that he's gonna off himself, somewhere in the North Pole, so mankind could be rid of him. It's a very morose story, very morose. But knowledge gap. I mean, my goodness, if and people like his dad would try to. Going back to the father, would try to get all sorts of medicine, all sorts of treatment, all sorts of help to help his son with his delusions or mental breakdowns. And Frankenstein the whole time is saying, Father, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. I'm like, But if you don't tell him the truth, he's going to think you're mad because there's no other reason for all the mental breakdowns that he has. So knowledge gap is can really build suspense. It could really put characters in a frenzy. It could really build tension for the reader. And I just wonder how, like, I love how the book is written. I'm not asking the book to be written differently, but what would happen? It's one of those what if questions. Like, what would happen if if he told the truth to one person, whether it was his friend, his best friend, his wife before he married her? Like, what would happen if he confessed, but he doesn't confess until the very end? And it's that's the knowledge gap. So knowledge gap can work so well in the matter of story and conflict and all that. And then I guess finally, very short, the theme of knowledge, in addition to the morality of knowledge, the forbidden knowledge, what knowledge is good, what knowledge is evil, the obsession of acquiring knowledge, and this thing which I said called the knowledge gap, a little separate from the themes, more of a technical thing. Just conscience. When you acquire knowledge, the more you understand the nature of yourself, the awareness of self, the more you understand nature of man, whether you're religious or not, you're going to understand sin and virtue. You're going to understand what's right and what's wrong. Even though the monster committed the crimes, the murders, out of vengeance, he also struggled with guilt that cannot be put away with, guilt that could not be removed. He relished in vengeance. He relished in the triumph of murdering, especially his maker's younger brother. But then he had, at least on a very surface level, he had developed a conscience. He wasn't perfectly reveling in his sin. And then when his maker died, he had no purpose after that. There was no mode for repentance. There was no mode for vengeance on mankind. And that's the tragedy of the whole creation of the monster, is he started understanding the conscience and what killing in cold blood does to the mind and to the spirit. He's still a child. He's still like this 2-3-year-old in a monstrosity, in a body that can do a lot of damage. But he, even with a very young mind, he's starting to develop the conscience. Then he, does away with himself, so he doesn't. He's not a plague on mankind anymore. And it's a very sad story. So, the theme of knowledge for Frankenstein, I think that's gonna be my topic for the stream. Those are my notes. But it's a book that you can really get into with a lot of stuff. Like, I only scratched the surface. And thank you for listening to the spoilers. All right, lots to talk about. Let's get into the chat. Let me grab some water one more time. Okay, so my eyes are kind of watery. Elias Jones, I need to put this up. Okay, I don't eat the cereal, but my Professor Geek, this is the time of the year for him. So Professor Geek, you got to answer this question because I don't eat the cereal. Frankenberry, Count Chocula, or Boo Berry? Now, if I were to eat a cereal, it'd probably be Count Chocula because I love berry flavor. I just never liked berry flavor in a cereal. So probably chocolate for me, Count Chocula. That's my answer. Big Al Presents says the original Invisible Man is my favorite Universal horror film. I really would like to see that movie. I think I could see it. I'm not into horror, but I don't think it's horror. And speaking of which, Big Al does have a Facebook page that is dedicated to the Universal Monsters. So if you are on Facebook, go ahead and check out the Universal Monsters Facebook page that he keeps up and maintains. Samuel says, a funny thing about that same teacher, the same teacher left the school after I graduated. Same with 2 other conservative teachers. Oh man. Well, the classrooms are worse off without them, I am sure. And I don't even say that because they're conservative. I'm just saying, when you have a a propensity to stay conservative. You want to keep the integrity of the literature as best as possible without too much analysis. Now, my analysis on good versus evil has nothing to do with, well, okay. My own analysis is good versus evil, divine versus man, the station of God versus the station of man. That's my analysis as a religious person. Mary Shelley, I don't believe lived a religious life by any means. So her understanding and writing good versus evil is going to be different. She's going to come at it from a different perspective than me. That said, good versus evil is universal, whether you're religious or not. I do believe good comes from the divine good, but even if you're not religious, there's killing a child in cold blood should be universally abhorrent to not just people speaking the same language, but like everywhere, So there is that. So I'm not really analyzing coming from a place of Mary Shelley's perspective. I don't think that's my place to. We're two very, very different people living in very different times. Let's see. Crystal Ashes says, picked up Frankenstein recently. Haven't finished it yet. I'm a slow reader, but I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about it. So hopefully I didn't spoil too much for you, Crystal Ashes. Like, I really didn't want to spoil it, but like at the same time, it's just one of those, I couldn't, it had to be done. But I think I did give a warning, right? So, yeah, and I did say story analysis, so. Private Eisen, good to see you there. Oh, Crystal Ashes confirms. Oh, you're a member. I need to put you up. If I was worried about spoilers, then I wouldn't be here. Say what needs to be said. No need to tiptoe around potential spoilers. Well, thank you. I feel better now. Thank you. All right. Yeah, okay, so Samuel Proctor says this book is a recording of a flashback. It's not a flashback, even though it's recounting the tales of the past. Oh, what's the word? Epistolary? Professor, you know the term. It's epistles, like letter writing or the accounting of tales. Like I love. Oh, okay. I gotta talk about this before I get back to the chat. Talking about the structure of the book, I really did appreciate the structure mostly of the book. You start like the first 4 chapters is actually individual letters of a sea captain writing to his sister. I think he's like a failed writer of some kind, which is kind of funny because that's probably Mary Shelley probably knew a lot of people who were like that with her circle, but he decides to be an adventurer and he seeks to go to the North Pole. He wants to obtain scientific knowledge and exploring the North Pole, especially in the 1800s, man, that's a feat. So you're going to be, world renowned if you can go to the North Pole and back. And so he's a very, very, very ambitious sea captain who is kind of in want of friends. Like he has his crew members, but they're not really friends. And he finds that affiliation. He starts having this incredible admiration for this one Victor Frankenstein, and he's very much in fellowship with with Frankenstein, who is pretty much just dazed from hypothermia and stuff like that. So he's still charismatic. He still has like this like light in his eyes. Like the sea captain is pretty much bewildered, like not bewildered, but he's in awe of this man. He has deep admiration. He soon has deep admiration for this man Frankenstein. And then when the affiliation is very close, when this is where Frankenstein confides everything in this one sea captain. So it's 4 letters to his sister, the sea captain. Walton is his name. And then he happens upon Frankenstein, who had been in pursuit of another dog sledder, who was, of course, the monster. And then Victor Frankenstein goes into his narrative. And then inside his narrative, he goes into the monster's narrative. And then he goes back to Frankenstein's, his own narrative, and then the sea captain. So you're really in the present only when you're with the sea captain. And I wanted to say this because this is the way to kill off a protagonist. When you're in the perspective of a main character, you can't kill them off. Now, I know people say, well, no, I mean, like, you can have a hero and then he could die and then you're in someone else's perspective. Yes, I know it's done, but I'm not saying, and I'm not encouraging that route. When you're in someone's perspective throughout the whole of the story, you really shouldn't have that person die until you're outside their timeline, or you write another book in another character's perspective and they die in the in the course of events as seen by another character. But with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, she did it wonderfully because you start in the perspective of a sea captain who comes upon this man Frankenstein, who gets the whole course of the tale, and then because of sickness, Victor Frankenstein passes away, and then you're in the present perspective of him and the monster. It's a wonderful scene. I won't go into it, but it's a good scene. That ending, the scene with the monster and the sea captain is really cool. It's really cool. But it's perfect. That epistolatory, I think that's how you call it. The letters. I'm going all the way down. Ah, Prof, what's that word? Did I say that word right? Epistolatory? But epistles, letters. That's the structure. So it's not really a flashback. It's very well written. What was it? What was I going with this? But it's the way, if you are going to have a main character pass away, that's the way to do it. Kind of like, if you have a character who's like decrepit or an old person, and obviously they have life and experience behind them, then they tell their tale and then they pass away. That I think that's really well done. All right. Hey, Andreas Hernandez, good to see you. What'd you miss? Well, it's 7:05. It's always 7 o'clock before I know it. But you asked me that like an hour ago, so hopefully you got what you needed. Brian Gilmartin, channel member. It's interesting that we get so many sympathetic versions of Frankenstein in more recent takes on him, when his original version was so tragic. Yeah. Now here's the thing. He is. So no spoilers for movies because I know the movie's a different take and I haven't seen the movie if I've not already mentioned that. But I did sympathize with him, when he's with the cottagers and he's helping them, and all he wants, it's described as his uttermost ambition to have one person's look of affection upon him. That's all he ever wanted. Now he uses the excuse of vengeance because he's bereft of that. It's like, well, that's the kid mentality. That's being a child. Like, no, if you have learned about virtue, you need to maintain virtue. The problem is, this is another real important part of the knowledge gap. The problem is both characters, both Victor Frankenstein and the creature, never came to a place of understanding. Victor, because he hated the look of the creature, hated what he had done, had imminent prejudice. Like, it was always there. It was even if he had a trace of sympathy for the creature when the creature told him his tale, there was a bit of compassion, there's a bit of sympathy, but then he is so full of prejudice. He always calls him a fiend, a devil. He kind of is after he kills William, the boy. But before all that, he was truly simply misunderstood. You want to talk about like the classic misunderstood villain? He was misunderstood because the villagers, the cottagers, I do believe this is my opinion of mankind. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of the cottager, or the villagers rather, would have prejudice because of his appearance. But that's not to say all mankind has that prejudice, when beholding a monster. If that monster could speak and communicate and demonstrate virtue, a lot of people, I believe, would overlook his appearance. But we never get that. And the monster himself is to be blamed for not understanding that after acquiring the knowledge of virtue. because he saw a little bit of virtue with the blind man DeLacy, a little bit before his DeLacy's son attacked him. Because the Felix, the son, thought the monster was attacking because the monster, all he wants is sympathy. And so he's holding the knees of the old man who's blind. He can't see who this is. And Felix, the son, thinks this monster is attacking the father. And it's all from a place of misunderstanding. But then the monster doesn't pursue that. He doesn't understand that. So he has a prejudice against human beings because he's thinking, well, they all hate me because I'm ugly. It's like, no, he heard a little bit of sympathy, a little bit of goodness before Felix attacks him, of Felix's father. The father was blind, so he couldn't see the appearance, but he was the only person besides Victor to well, actually, Victor doesn't even speak to him affectionately. There was affection in the manner of speech with DeLacy. But the monster didn't hold on to that hope. And so he has prejudice developed from that. And then Victor doesn't help the matter. He has prejudice because you're loathsome, you're a fiend, you're incapable of virtue. It's like, well, actually, no, the monster is capable of virtue, you fool, but you, the father figure, abandoned him before he could develop those traits. And so both are pathetic, both do evil. Both characters do evil. There's no virtuous character among the two, at least. They do bad things, they do heinous things, and they both of them get their comeuppance in the end. Unfortunately, they're not noble creatures. They succumb to their whims and their vice and their wits more than virtue. And it all comes from a place of misunderstanding. A little bit of a sidebar, with something that's important like marriage. If you ever think, you young people out there, to think about marriage, a lot of married couples who have been married over decades, like 20, 30 years, they'll say communication is everything. And that's true. But it's the first step of maintaining a good marriage. Communication is important, but what's even more important is a place of understanding, coming to your spouse, coming to your loved one with a place of understanding, meaning understanding the other side. Victor Frankenstein, I know we're not talking about a marriage in this case, but in the way of communication, yeah, they communicated to each other, but there was built-in prejudice on both sides. And Victor doesn't come from a place of sympathy and understanding for very long, and the monster doesn't learn understanding. That's the problem. So more than communication to maintain a good marriage is come at it from a place of understanding. Like, understand why your husband is hurt or why your wife is hurt, and sympathize. Not even sympathize, like try to find the empathy degree. And that's what was lacking in this knowledge gap in the book. The knowledge gap of just prejudice, communication, yes, but prejudice followed the communication. A place of understanding did not follow, and that was both Victor Frankenstein and the monster. It was so sad, so sad. There was no reasoning. There was no reasoning behind the communication. All right, I'm not gonna read any comments regarding the movie. All right. Crystal Ashes says, Victor Frankenstein, so powerful and so wise, he could use the force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life. Yeah, like oh, yeah, you want to do a Star Wars, oh, yeah, bravo, Crystal Ashes, that's a good Star Wars analogy, yeah, Darth Plagueis, see, I've said this before on my stream, Darth Plagueis is my favorite villain in Star Wars history. I love him so much as a villain. He is the Frankenstein of Star Wars. Oh my gosh, that's perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. Brian Gilmartin says, somewhat related to the subject of knowledge, in Lovecraftian fiction, the eldritch entities that characterize it were described as being so otherworldly horrific that to even behold them was enough to shatter a person's mind. Yeah. Whew. Yeah. We're more than anything else, we're afraid of the unknown. We really are afraid of the unknown. In fiction, but also in nonfiction. Like when we don't know what's going to happen next in life, that can make us apprehensive if we're not careful. Andrea says the story is like Full Metal Alchemist in science, while good can also be used improperly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Frankie Jr. vegetarian confirmed. I think that's what the book was. Yep. Yep. Um. Yeah. People are talking about Full Metal Alchemist. Here's a quote from Crystal Ashes. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. Ian Malcolm. Pretty much the most famous, oh, excuse me, the most famous quote regarding science fiction. Digifex says Shelley was an atheist, did not use this analysis. Yeah, I mean, this is my own personal analysis. No, actually, I don't know. Professor, was Shelley an atheist? Her husband was kind of an atheist occultist, right? Um, I can't remember if Shelley was a Christian. Oh, sorry guys, I got a cough. 1 second. It's allergies, I guess. Samuel Proctor says part of blind man part of the blind man part of the plot made it to the Universal Bride of Frankenstein. I'm not gonna don't tell me what happens next. I want to. Okay, I take your word for it. um, okay. Are you telling me? Andrea says, are you telling me that Frankenstein is a story about what happens if a father abandons his son? What? It's a shame the monster didn't even have a mother to take care of him. Yeah, well, and that's the other thing is like, is it natural to, like, for a man to create someone and not have a mother figure? It's like the father and mother duo, the father mother dynamics is really, really important. And I wanted to touch on real quick before going back to the chat that it is implied that he pursued knowledge in such a fantastic, imaginative, kind of obsessed way as a means to move on from his mother's death because his mother was a kind woman. She loved her children. She Elizabeth had scarlet fever first, and then her adopted mother, Frankenstein's mother, attended to her, and Elizabeth was made well after that, but she contracted the disease and unfortunately perished after that. And the grief was very much upset the home, and then him leaving for studies. It was just kind of a way to break away from the grief. Now, I remember hearing, oh, what is her name? Richardson, I think her name was. The actress who was what's his name? Liam Neeson's wife. What was her first name? Richardson was her last name. She perished in a skiing accident. Tragically, I think she was in her 40s, maybe 50s. And I think she died in a skiing accident. And Liam Neeson was so beside himself after that. But one thing I remembered he did, he went back to acting pretty soon after that because his work helped him with the grief. And there is some good thing to that. Like, it's not that you want to deny grief or, say I'm not going to dwell on this tragedy or whatever. You do need a moment of, you need some time to have that bereavement, if a loved one passes away. But there's also value. Well, really, it's not even value so much as it is a remedy. It's a medicine to help you with your grief. And that is like to move on with your routine. I can't imagine if something, heaven forbid, happened where I faced a tragedy where I would just be just in bed, not wanting to move on because I'm so beside myself with grief. Yeah, grief is really, really important. You need to go through the grieving process in such a tragedy. Um, but there is worth in working, going back to being productive and going back, in Liam Neeson's case, it was acting. And that's what I would have people like if something happened to me and people around me loved me, I would say, like, don't forget me, but definitely continue with life and the joys. So he had a little bit of that. Frankenstein had a little bit of that with um, his science after the death of his mother. But after he created the monster and then the monster ensued tragedy after that, he could not pursue the love of science. He could not pursue the love of nature. He could not pursue the love of mankind and his family he loved so much. It just wasn't the same. Everything was gray around him. Even in the most beautiful scenery with the Alps and all that is just he couldn't live like a man could live after his creation. But I feel like confession would have helped with it. Oh, gee. Guys, this might be a 2-hour stream because it's just so deep. So, all right. Yeah, Dr. Frankenstein says Ghost Planet is a very driven man. Yes. Um, Andreas, I actually don't know about Mega Man. I don't know Mega Man lore, so I don't know the creation of Mega Man. But oh yeah, Brian says she hasn't played Mega Man, so I don't think she could say much about it. Yeah, I haven't done Mega Man yet. I haven't played those games. Oh, I will eventually. I need to go back to the retro box and start playing those games. But I don't know the story, unfortunately. And I actually would like to play the game first before I knew the story. All right, looks like you guys are talking amongst yourselves. Devin Corin, hello from France. Well, hello from USA. Cool. Good to see you. Now, are you living in France but you're from another country, or are you French? Because it'd be nice to have some French listeners. French people are wonderfully candid. At least the French people I knew back in Seattle. And artistic. Although I don't think I've ever been like trolled by a French person. Like I think I would rather have the trolling be done to me in person. But don't troll me. I'm not inviting trolls. All right, continuing on down. Okay, so my wonderful prof says Count Chocula and Frankenberry are for me. So both, I guess, but Count Chocula is the best. Yeah, I really actually don't know what Count Chocula is. All I know is I buy a box for him when I see the box in the grocery store. Yes, okay, yes. Epistolary. Did I say that word right before? Epistolary novel. Yeah, very good. I wonder how Sonograver feels about the movie Gladiator. I'm so bad with movies. I haven't seen the Gladiator. I have not seen a lot of classic movies, y'all. It's something I have to admit. But we got years ahead. If I maintain my health and stuff, stick to the walks and stick to eating vegetables, then I'll live long enough to see all these movies. Oh, okay. Prof wants to confirm. The Shelleys were against religion, but believed in too many supernatural forces to truly embody the label atheist. Mary Shelley is working out guilt in the book over the consequences of their lifestyle. There you go. There you go. Samuel Proctor says, I think the villagers' prejudice is very understandable considering their perspective. Yeah, they didn't know who he was. Yeah, exactly. They just see a big strange humanoid thing in front of them, and that's when their survival instincts kick in. Yeah, that's the thing is like I don't want to say prejudice. The prejudice would come after knowing the monster could demonstrate good and be a good person in society. That's where prejudice comes in. But the monster's seeing it as prejudice because he's not understanding human instinct, you know? He only knows survivalist instincts with himself, his own experience. But he doesn't understand like, okay, you're at least 2 feet taller than the tallest man. And unfortunately, monster, you're hideously ugly. So that's just gonna have a fight or flight response. Now, if Herman Munster came knocking on my door, I would just, knowing the Munsters now, I wouldn't faint. I would say, "Hey, come on in. I probably don't have food that you like, but actually, no, no. The Munsters actually eat normal food. That's what I remember. That's the distinction between them. Well, there's more than that. With the Addams family, Addams family like eat the gross stuff, the weird stuff. I think the Munsters though eat normal food. I think they eat things like oatmeal and roast chicken and stuff. So, yeah, I could cook for the Munsters. That'd be great. I can't. Oh, we're gonna watch the Munsters again. I love both of them. Yeah, I bet Count Dooku on Vega says is the Dracula of Star Wars. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll be reading The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde next, and then I will finish the season with Dracula. Private Eye says, hello, good to see you. Good to see you, Amy. Private Eye says, I read the book years ago. I was surprised by the amount of things I did not expect from the monster. Considering pop culture, I found the tale weird, but I thought a lot about it through the years. It's dense. I shouldn't say dense. That's not the right. It's very involved. It's very deep. Oh, don't worry, Samuel Proctor. It's not that I'm like, oh, don't you dare write those in the chat. Like, I'm sure a lot of people have seen those movies. I haven't, so that's why I'm neglecting it. So, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Crystal Ashes says, Sound Engraver. There isn't really much a story to the classic Mega Man games. Lots of background lore, but the games themselves aren't exactly story heavy. Okay, good to know. I'll probably like the games just because of the music and the gameplay, probably. Yeah, look forward to the Dracula analysis. That's Prof's favorite out of all three. So I'm looking forward to that one. I know it's gonna be very, very different. But he also says it's very well written. Yeah, I will say if you haven't read Frankenstein, it's wonderfully structured. I will say it reads very well. If you're into the old, more Victorian 1800s English, if you're used to that. Not looking at you, Bridgerton. Sometimes I see my mother. I walk up to my mother-in-law and I go through the door and I see her watching Bridgerton and I'm like. By the way, that's not classical music. That theme song from Bridgerton is so poorly composed. It's pop. It's not classical music. And I just have a feeling it doesn't reflect English history and culture very well. That's just my 2 cents as an American who doesn't know any better. But I will recommend Pride and Prejudice. Anyway, so the reading is fine. It's pretty good. The characterization, I really do feel like Victor Frankenstein maybe would have dealt with how he's dealt with the events, maybe the same, but I feel like his characterization I think is it's all over the place, and I wonder if it's because a woman wrote. He's hyper emotional. Now he has a lot of things to deal with, but the way he deals with them is very hyper emotional. And I'm not saying Mary Shelley did not write it well. She wrote a classic piece of fiction very, very well. But that I don't want to say bipolar lightly like that, but it's hot and cold with his emotions. It's also very morose, by the way. Not only does Victor Frankenstein complain and whine a lot in his recounting of the tale, but the monster also complains and whines a lot too. I mean, they're both poor, misfortunate souls, but they do a lot of whining. There's no laughter, there's no levity, there's no joy. Well, there's a little joy, momentary bits of joy, but it's really dark and grim the whole time. But if you can if you can go through like half an hour, 45 minutes of that for the October season, it's good. Yeah, like father, like son, says Private Eye. Andrea says it would be cool to see Prof and Sound Engraver game stream one day. Both can play co-op too. Well, we play Mario Kart, and he beats me every time. I'm always coming in second. Um, I would love to. It would be really nice to do a game stream. I'd probably do it by myself because I just have a different library of games I like to play, whereas Prof has his own library of games. Not really at that point in my work schedule where I can make that happen. It would be a time in my life where I just don't teach so much. Because any videos I do want to do is music related that I want to develop, and all that. Um, but I'm not ruling it out. I would love to play. What games would I play? I would say Donkey Kong, but it is the problem with Donkey Kong is even though I've played those games all my life, it's like I die a lot. Like I'm not a professional. I'm not a pro. It'd probably be boring. But something like okay, so I could play something like Paper Mario. Um I'm in Zelda right now. I'm in Ocarina of Time, and I came upon the royal tomb with the zombies, and I had okay, so I was on my bed, and I had the lights off. I'm on my Switch. I had the lights off and the door closed because I close my studio door a lot because there's a hum of the refrigerator. It's a pretty big refrigerator, and I go in this a tomb, and then like there's the skeletons and stuff like that, and then you go to one of the skeletons, and it says to Zelda, beware those who break into the tomb of the lurkers of the dark. I'm like, skeletons. I've battled skeletons before. It's not a big deal. But if you played that game, it goes into you go into an inner door. Or an inner room, and there's like this ghastly green stuff that kind of reminds me of like the ghoulish animated episode with Ra's al Ghul with his daughter and the really creepy skeleton ghost woman or whatever. That's kind of what it reminded me of. And the zombies, they're pixelated like 64. They're not scary, but the concept is scary because they not only attack, they not only come at you, they freeze you in place, and as they freeze you, there's this horrifying scream, like a woman screaming, even though they're zombies, and then they freeze you in place, and then they suck life out of you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I get out of this? And then I'm like, I pause the game, I turn on the light, and I open the door, and that would be something that would happen in a game stream. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so scary. I'm so scared. So scared. So anyway, which Mario Kart Sound Engraver? Is it Mario Kart 8? It's not the 64 one. It's not the Super Nintendo one. It's the... Oh, sorry. Did you hear that crack? It's the one... Yeah. The new one. What else? Before I wrap it up, since it is kind of getting to the 2-hour mark. Oh my gosh. The sunset. That's okay. Yeah. Private Eye says, if it makes you feel better, you would be a very popular as a streamer if you do that. Yeah, like be scared while trying to get past the zombies. Like these 64-bit pixelated zombies or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd have like, oh, turn on the lights, open the door, I'm scared. Yeah, I'm easily scared. I'm easily spooked. I got a boo necklace for Hollow Scream when we go to Busch Gardens, and I'm not scared. I'll say, guys, I'll mess with the actors. They're really good. But they're like, we are not scary. I wear this dark cloth over my face, but really, it's just me trying to look scary, but I'm not scary. Like the actors in Busch Gardens are really good. They're very theatrical. I'm like, with my boo necklace, like I'm scared, and I'm not scared to tell you I'm scared. And then I'll like get like these 11-year-old boys like giving me a double glance, like double take, like you're an adult and you're scared. I'm like, that's right. What of it? I don't care. I'm not a man with a boo necklace. It'd be worse. I have a my brother-in-law will wear the boo necklace, and he's like this like muscular like athletic guy, and I'm like, that's so sad that he has to wear the boo necklace. But I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine wearing the boo necklace. Um anyway, what was I gonna say? Music is going well before we wrap it up here. Music is going well. I haven't really been in SuperCollider all month. I need to get back into SuperCollider, but I'll try to get into it a little bit more this month. But I've been really at my album. I've got like 6 out of my 8 tracks completely mixed. They're not mastered, and I got to record violin for some of them. But they're mixed, and so that's 6 out of 8 tracks. I'm gonna try to. There's this one track that the percussion was not working. Actually, 2 of them. The percussion kit or the rhythmic section was not working. I finally found my rhythmic section, and that'll be almost done. And then I'm gonna mix one more big song, and then we should be good. We should be good. I'd like to finish by end of September. That's the deadline. So I've been doing nothing else. I haven't written sci-fi. I haven't been in SuperCollider. I haven't done anything in YouTube besides streaming and posting up shorts for my streams. And I'm not feeling guilty. I don't feel bad. This is an album I want to make. And I'm learning mixing and mastering. I've accepted that I will not know every single mixing secret, but the mixes that I do have completed, I feel good about. So I guess that's part of the learning experience. So in any case, I think we'll just end it there. Next week, I'm really excited about the topic. I kind of wanted to talk about this week, but I'm glad I talked about Frankenstein. Next week, I want to talk about art in the way of parasocial relationships that are YouTubers, specifically YouTubers, internet. But I've got stuff to just. I gotta say stuff. Gotta say stuff. How to sell your art as as an artist with a YouTube channel. But like, kind of the misgivings I have about art and parasocial relationships, really because of what I see in the YouTube sphere, and I see very mediocre art, and I see just a lot of art out there that's just not good, but people will support the personality, not the art, and I want to talk about that. I got a cough again, but in any case, let's end it there. I'll see you next week. Until I see you next, keep producing, preserving, and promoting that good art and literature that you love, and catch you later.